Elena wiped the sweat from her brow as she polished the last of the silverware in the Harrington mansion. The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, catching the sparkle of crystal glasses she had cleaned earlier. 6 months she had worked here, yet she still felt like a ghost moving through the massive house. The Harringtons barely noticed her most days. Mr. Harrington, tall with graying temples and always checking his expensive watch, left before sunrise for his investment firm downtown. Mrs. Harrington spent her days organizing charity events and lunching with other wealthy women, returning home only to change outfits before evening gatherings. Their twin children, home from their Ivy League university for summer break, treated the house like a hotel, and Elena like hotel staff. "It pays the bills," Elena whispered to herself in her native tongue. She placed the silver serving tray back in its cabinet and moved to dust the living room. The grand piano stood as the centerpiece of the room, a magnificent Steinway that cost more than Elena would earn in 10 years. Its polished black surface reflected the chandelier hanging above it. Elena approached it with special care, using a soft cloth to remove even the smallest fingerprints. From its gleaming surface, no one in the family actually played it. Mrs. Harrington had mentioned once that it was an investment piece and essential for entertaining. Guests would occasionally tinker with the keys during parties, but the instrument mostly sat silent and beautiful, like an expensive painting. Elena paused, her hand hovering over the closed lid. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember. The memories came in flashes. The cramped apartment back home where her grandmother's upright piano had taken up nearly an entire wall. The feel of cool keys under small fingers. The pride in her teacher's eyes when she mastered a difficult passage. The sound of the garage door opening snapped her back to reality. The twins were home. Elena quickly moved away from the piano and busied herself with the bookshelves. "I'm telling you, Professor Reynolds is completely unreasonable," the son complained as they entered, tossing his designer backpack onto a chair Elena had just arranged. "A paper and presentation due in the same week? It's like he thinks we don't have other classes." His sister rolled her eyes. "Maybe if you hadn't waited until the last minute like you always do." They continued through the living room and up the stairs, neither acknowledging Elena's presence. She was used to this, the way they would sometimes talk about deeply personal matters right in front of her, as if she were a piece of furniture. In their minds, her limited English made her opinions irrelevant, her presence inconsequential. What they didn't know was that Elena understood far more than she let on. Her English was better than she displayed, but experience had taught her that employers were more comfortable with maids who seemed less intelligent, less aware. It was safer this way. Elena finished the living room and moved to prepare dinner. Mrs. Harrington had left a note that morning. They would be having guests tonight. Nothing formal, just the husband's colleague and his wife. 4 people total? Elena was to prepare the meal and leave before they arrived. As she chopped vegetables for the salad, she thought about her small apartment 20 minutes away by bus. It wasn't much. A studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom so small she could touch all 4 walls at once. But it was clean, it was hers, and most importantly, it had a keyboard. Not a real piano, of course, just a basic electronic keyboard she'd found at a second-hand shop. She kept it on low volume and played with headphones after 8 p.m. out of respect for her neighbors. But those evening hours when her fingers could once again dance across keys were what kept her going. Elena had been a prodigy once. Back home, she had performed with the National Orchestra at 16. Her teacher had spoken of scholarships abroad, of conservatories and concert halls. Then came the political unrest, her father's arrest for speaking against the government, and the midnight escape across borders with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Her parents had settled in a refugee community in another European country. Elena had chosen America, following a cousin who promised better opportunities. The cousin had moved away 6 months later, but Elena stayed, determined to build something from nothing. Her music degree from back home meant nothing here. Her accent closed doors before she could open them. Cleaning houses was honest work that paid the bills while she took night classes to improve her English and learn computer skills. Someday, she promised herself, someday. The back door opened and Mrs. Harrington entered with shopping bags. "Oh good, you're preparing dinner," she said, barely glancing at Elena. "I've bought some flowers for the table. Please arrange them in the crystal vase, not the blue one." The clear one we got from Italy. Yes, ma'am, Elena replied. Keeping her eyes down, Mrs. Harrington paused, looking at the vegetables Elena had prepared. Actually, I've changed my mind about the menu. Gregory's wife is doing some sort of cleanse, so we need something gluten-free. Can you make that fish dish from last week instead? Elena nodded, though this meant starting over with just 2 hours before dinner. Of course, ma'am. Wonderful. Mrs. Harrington glanced at her diamond-encrusted watch. I have my massage in 30 minutes. The twins might want a snack when they come down. They had practice today. With that, she drifted out of the kitchen, trailing expensive perfume behind her. Elena disposed of the vegetables she'd spent the last hour preparing and began defrosting fish fillets. As she worked, she hummed softly to herself, Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece her grandmother had taught her. The kitchen was her favorite room in the house. The family rarely entered it, giving Elena a small domain where she could exist without scrutiny. The house phone rang, and Elena answered it as instructed. Harrington residence, she said carefully. This is Richard Harrington, came the clipped voice of the man of the house. Tell Victoria I'm bringing 2 more people for dinner. Business associates from Shanghai. Make sure there's enough food. Yes, sir. I will tell Mrs. Harrington, Elena replied. And Elena, he added, surprising her by using her name, put out the good scotch. The one in my study behind the books. Yes, sir. He hung up without saying goodbye. Elena sighed and pulled out more fish from the freezer. 6 people now, not 4. She would need to work quickly. Upstairs, she could hear the twins arguing about something. A door slammed. Music started playing loudly, then was turned down after a shout from one to the other. Elena allowed their drama to fade into background noise as she focused on her tasks. By 6 o'clock, the dining room was set with the family's second-best china. Mrs. Harrington reserved the best for formal occasions. Crystal glasses sparkled under soft lighting, and fresh flowers from the garden shop added color to the immaculate table. The house smelled of garlic and herbs, and the gluten-free chocolate cake was cooling on a rack. Elena gathered her things as the family began to assemble for the evening. Mr. Harrington arrived home, barking orders into his phone. Mrs. Harrington emerged from her bedroom in a new outfit, hair freshly styled. The twins slouched at the kitchen counter picking at the appetizers Elena had prepared. You can go now, Mrs. Harrington told Elena while examining her reflection in a hallway mirror. Everything looks acceptable. We'll manage the serving ourselves. Yes, ma'am. Good night, Elena replied, slipping on her worn coat. None of them responded. They had already moved on, discussing who would arrive first and whether the wine was properly chilled. Elena let herself out through the side door, invisible once more. Outside, the evening air felt cool against her skin. She took a deep breath, leaving behind the smell of expensive perfume and cleaning products, transitioning back to her real life. Her bus was coming in 7 minutes. If she hurried, she could catch it and be home by 7. As she walked down the long driveway, Elena allowed her posture to change. Her shoulders relaxed, her chin lifted, and her pace became more confident with each step away from the mansion. The mask of the silent, obedient maid fell away, revealing the woman beneath, a woman with dreams, with music still living in her fingertips, with a past full of applause and a future still unwritten. Tonight, after a quick dinner and shower, she would play Chopin, perhaps. His nocturnes always soothed her after difficult days. Or maybe Bach, whose complex patterns required such focus that she couldn't think about anything else while playing them. The approaching headlights of an expensive car told her the Harringtons' guests had arrived early. Elena quickened her pace, staying close to the edge of the driveway. The car slowed as it passed her, and through the tinted windows she caught a glimpse of curious eyes examining the woman walking away from the mansion. Let them look, she thought. They see only what they expect to see, a maid heading home after cleaning someone else's house. They don't see the musician, the dreamer, the survivor. Little did they know that next week at this very house everything would change, that the invisible woman they passed on the driveway would soon become impossible to ignore, that music, like truth, has a way of revealing itself when least expected. For now, though, Elena was content with her secret. She hummed Chopin's Ballade No. 1 as she walked toward the bus stop, fingers twitching slightly at her sides, playing invisible keys in the evening, ere the following week brought news that changed the atmosphere in the Harrington household. Mr. Harrington burst through the front door on Tuesday evening with an energy Elena had never seen from him before. "It's official," he announced to his wife, who was arranging flowers in the foyer. "The board approved my promotion this afternoon. I'm the youngest partner in the firm's history." Mrs. Harrington's face lit up as she abandoned her flowers to embrace her husband. "Richard, that's wonderful. We must celebrate." Elena, dusting the hallway bookshelf, kept her eyes down but her ears open. The promotion had been all Mr. Harrington had talked about for months. Even in the rare moments he acknowledged her presence. "I've already spoken to Vivian about planning something," Mrs. Harrington continued, referring to her event planner. "We should host it here, don't you think? Show off the new East Wing renovation." Mr. Harrington nodded, loosening his tie. "Absolutely. Everyone from the firm should be invited, plus clients, of course. Oh, and the mayor. He's been very helpful with that waterfront project." "This Saturday," Mrs. Harrington decided. "It's short notice, but that makes it more exclusive. People will rearrange their schedules for this." Elena silently calculated what this would mean for her. A major party in 4 days. The house would need to be spotless. There would be extra food preparation, special cleaning, flower arrangements. She would need to cancel her weekend English class. "Elena," Mrs. Harrington called, suddenly remembering her presence. "We'll need you for extra hours this week. The house must be perfect for Saturday's party." "Yes, ma'am," Elena replied softly. "And you'll need to help during the event as well. Code check mainly and keeping the bathrooms tidy. Vivian will bring in servers for the food and drinks." Elena nodded, keeping her expression neutral despite the disappointment of missing her English class. "I understand." "Excellent." Mrs. Harrington turned back to her husband, Elena already forgotten. "I'm thinking we should have live music. Not a full band, too loud for conversation, but perhaps someone at the piano? It would be a shame not to use it." Mr. Harrington checked his ever-present phone. "Whatever you think is best, dear. Just make sure there's good champagne." Elena finished dusting and moved to the kitchen, her mind racing with all the extra work ahead. She would need to request time off from her second job cleaning offices in the evenings. The Harringtons would pay her overtime, but the office manager might not hold her position if she missed shifts. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The already clean mansion was cleaned again. Windows were washed inside and out. Silver was polished until it gleamed. Fresh flowers arrived by the bucketful. Delivery people came and went with extra chairs, special linens, cases of wine. Elena worked from sunrise until well after dark each day. Her hands grew raw from cleaning chemicals. Her back ached from scrubbing floors and moving furniture, but she never complained. Not when the twins made messes in rooms she'd just cleaned. Not when Mrs. Harrington changed her mind about the flower arrangements 3 times. Not when Mr. Harrington tracked mud across the freshly mopped entryway. On Friday night, too exhausted to take the bus, Elena accepted Mrs. Harrington's reluctant offer to sleep in the small staff room off the kitchen. It wasn't much, just a narrow bed and a nightstand, but it meant she could get a few more hours of sleep before the big day. As the household finally quieted, Elena lay awake, thinking about the piano. During her cleaning frenzy, she'd had to dust it thoroughly, inside and out. Her fingers had itched to touch the keys, to feel their weight and response. It had been so long since she'd played on a real piano instead of her electronic keyboard. "Just one note," she whispered to herself in the darkness. No one would know, but her responsible side won out. She couldn't risk her job. Not when she was still saving for community college classes. Instead, she fell asleep with Rachmaninoff playing in her dreams. Saturday arrived with the chaotic energy of final preparations. Mrs. Harrington fluttered from room to room, followed by her event planner and a team of florists. The caterers arrived and took over the kitchen, politely but firmly establishing their territory. Elena was assigned to help the housekeeping team with last-minute touches. By late afternoon, the transformation was complete. The Harrington mansion glowed with warm light from dozens of candles. Flower arrangements adorned every surface. The bar in the corner of the grand living room was stocked with top-shelf liquors. Servers in black and white attire practiced their routes through the space. "Elena," Mrs. Harrington called, finding her adjusting a painting in the hallway. "Your uniform for tonight." She handed Elena a garment bag, containing a plain black dress with a white collar, different from her usual cleaning clothes, but still clearly marking her as staff. "You'll be stationed by the front door for coats," Mrs. Harrington instructed. "Later you'll help keep the guest bathroom stocked and tidy." Try to be invisible, yes? Efficient but not noticeable. Yes, ma'am, Elena replied, taking the dress. And do something with your hair, Mrs. Harrington added, gesturing vaguely at Elena's practical bun. Perhaps, well, just make it neat. As Mrs. Harrington hurried off to solve a crisis involving ice sculptures, Elena retreated to the staff bathroom to change. The dress fit well enough, though the collar itched. She redid her hair, keeping it in a bun but taking more care with it. Looking in the mirror, Elena barely recognized herself. She looked tired, yes, the dark circles under her eyes testified to the grueling week. But there was something else, too. A distance in her gaze that hadn't been there when she first came to America. When had she started looking so resigned? She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Not invisible, she whispered to her reflection. Just unseen. By 7 o'clock, the first guests began to arrive. Elena took coats with quiet efficiency, hanging them in the designated closet and offering claim tickets with a polite smile. The guests, men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, barely glanced at her as they handed over their belongings. The house filled quickly. Laughter and conversation grew louder as champagne flowed freely. A young man in a tuxedo played soft classical pieces on the piano, background music, pleasant but not meant to be the focus of attention. From her station by the door, Elena caught glimpses of the party in full swing, Mr. Harrington holding court near the fireplace, accepting congratulations, Mrs. Harrington flitting from group to group, the perfect hostess. The twins and their university friends clustered near the bar, getting progressively louder with each drink. After the initial rush, new arrivals slowed to a trickle. Elena was about to check if she was needed elsewhere when the event planner approached. "The guest bathrooms need attention," she said briskly. "Fresh towels, check the soap, make sure everything is spotless." Elena nodded and headed to the supply closet for what she needed. As she passed through the edges of the party, she felt strangely invisible despite being in plain sight. Guests moved around her as if she were a piece of furniture, conversations continuing uninterrupted. In the guest bathroom off the main hallway, Elena replaced hand towels and straightened bottles of fancy hand soap. She was wiping down the marble countertop when she overheard voices just outside the door. "Dad's promotion is such a big deal," said the voice of the Harrington son. "But this party is so stuffy. All these old people from the firm talking about stock options." "We should liven things up," replied a friend, words slightly slurred. "Didn't your family hire a pianist? That dude is putting everyone to sleep with his Mozart or whatever." "He's on break right now," said the son. "Piano's free if you want to play Piano Man or something." Their laughter faded as they moved away from the door. Elena finished her task and moved to the second bathroom, then the third, all the while hearing snippets of conversations about business deals, vacation homes, and boarding schools. When she returned to the main part of the house, the young pianist was indeed gone, probably taking his scheduled break. The piano sat momentarily silent amid the buzzing conversation and clinking glasses. Elena felt drawn to it despite herself. Just to look, she thought. Just to see a real concert piano up close. She approached carefully, making herself as unobtrusive as possible. The lid was propped open, revealing the complex inner workings, the hammers and strings that transformed human touch into sound. Elena's fingers tingled with muscle memory. "Hey, look who's interested in the piano." The loud voice made Elena jump. The Harrington son was back, red-faced from drinking, with 3 friends in tow. He was looking directly at Elena with an expression of amused curiosity. "Do you play?" he asked, his voice carrying enough that nearby conversations paused. Elena shook her head and began to back away. "Excuse me, sir. I need to return to work." "No, wait," he insisted, stepping closer. "I saw how you were looking at it. Come on, play us something." More people were turning now. Elena felt her cheeks grow hot with embarrassment. "I cannot," she said firmly. "Please excuse me." She tried to move past him, but he stepped in her path, swaying slightly. "Just one song. It'll be fun." His friends chuckled, and one called out, "Yeah, let's hear what the maid can do." Mrs. Harrington appeared at her son's side, her smile tight with tension. "What's happening here?" "Mom, our maid wants to play the piano," the son announced, as if it had been Elena's idea. "I do not," Elena began, but was cut off. "Don't be ridiculous," Mrs. Harrington hissed at her son. Then, noticing the growing audience, she forced a light laugh, though I suppose it might be amusing. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Mrs. Harrington turned to her with a brittle smile. "Elena, why don't you play a little something for our guests?" "Just a simple tune?" It might be charming, it wasn't a request. Elena knew that tone. Refusing would cost her this job and possibly future references. The room had grown quieter, dozens of eyes now watching the scene unfold with detached curiosity, like people observing animals at the zoo. Time seemed to slow down. Elena saw the hired pianist returning, confusion on his face. She saw the twins' friends nudging each other with anticipatory grins. She saw Mr. Harrington frowning from across the room, clearly displeased by the disruption. And then something inside Elena shifted. 6 years of hiding. 6 years of making herself small. 6 years of being unseen. "One piece," she said quietly. Mrs. Harrington blinked in surprise, then recovered with a patronizing smile. "Wonderful. Everyone, our Elena is going to entertain us for a moment." As Elena moved toward the piano bench, she heard whispers and muffled laughter. The hired pianist stepped aside, a look of pity on his face. The son and his friends positioned themselves where they could watch, clearly expecting a train wreck. Elena sat down, her back straight, her heart pounding. She placed her work-roughened hands on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness. She closed her eyes for just a moment, traveling back in time to her last recital in her homeland, before everything changed. Then, she began to play. The room fell silent as Elena placed her fingers on the keys. She took a deep breath, her eyes still closed, gathering courage. The Harrington son snickered, nudging his friend. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, while others wore expressions of mild curiosity. Mrs. Harrington stood nearby, her smile frozen in place, already regretting this impromptu entertainment. Then Elena pressed a single key. The note rang out, pure and perfect, filling the room with its clarity. There was something in that single note, a depth, a confidence, that made several guests straighten up and look more closely at the woman in the maid's uniform. Without opening her eyes, Elena began to play Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. The opening notes flowed gently like a story beginning to unfold. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of thousands of hours of practice, finding each key with perfect precision, despite the years away from a proper piano. As the piece progressed, growing more complex, her body swayed slightly with the music, lost in the rising and falling phrases. The Harrington son's smirk faded. Mrs. Harrington's hand rose unconsciously to her throat. The hired pianist's mouth fell open in astonishment. The piece built in intensity, Elena's fingers flying across the keys with increasing speed and passion. The technical difficulty was immense. Arpeggios cascading like waterfalls, delicate trills executed with flawless control, dynamic shifts from whisper soft to thundering power. Yet she made it look effortless, as if the music were simply flowing through her. Conversations died. Champagne glasses were set down forgotten. The bustling servers paused in their tracks, trays of hors d'oeuvres held motionless. Even the kitchen staff emerged from the back to peer around the doorway, drawn by the unexpected sound. As Elena reached the tumultuous middle section of the piece, tears began to stream down her face. She didn't wipe them away, couldn't have even if she wanted to, her hands were too busy creating magic. These were not tears of embarrassment but of release, 6 years of buried passion finally finding expression. The guests watched, transfixed. Many had attended symphony performances in the finest concert halls around the world, had seen renowned pianists play this very piece. But there was something about witnessing this moment, this revelation of hidden brilliance that made the experience transcendent. Mrs. Harrington's event planner leaned in to whisper something, but Mrs. Harrington silenced her with a raised hand, unable to tear her eyes away from Elena. Mr. Harrington stood motionless by the fireplace, his whiskey glass halfway to his lips forgotten. When Elena reached the final turbulent passages of the ballade, her whole body became part of the performance, her shoulders rising and falling with the crescendos and diminuendos. Her fingers attacked the keys with controlled fury, then caressed them with tender delicacy seconds later. The contrast was spellbinding. The final chords resonated through the room, hanging in the air for what seemed like an eternity. And then, Silence. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Elena opened her eyes, the spell broken. Reality rushed back. She was still in her maid's uniform, still at her employer's party, still the woman who cleaned their toilets and made their beds. She quickly stood, wiping tears from her cheeks with trembling hands, and turned to flee. Before she could take a step, the room erupted in applause. Not polite society applause, but genuine, thunderous appreciation. People rose to their feet, some calling bravo. Others simply stared in astonishment, hands clapping automatically while their minds tried to reconcile what they'd just witnessed. Elena stood frozen, overwhelmed by the response. Mrs. Harrington's face was unreadable, shock mixed with something that might have been embarrassment or wonder or both. The Harrington son looked like he'd been struck, his earlier mockery transformed into stunned respect. An older gentleman pushed his way through the crowd to Elena's side. He took her hand and raised it like a boxing referee declaring a winner, which only made the applause grow louder. "My dear," he said when the noise began to subside, "that was extraordinary. I've heard Paulini play that ballad at Carnegie Hall, and your interpretation rivals his. Who are you? Where did you study?" All eyes were on Elena. The question hung in the air. Mrs. Harrington stepped forward, perhaps to intervene, then stopped herself. Elena swallowed hard. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, her accent more pronounced than usual as emotion overtook her careful pronunciation. "I studied at the National Conservatory in my country," she said, "before the troubles came." "Which conservatory?" The man pressed, still holding her hand. "I'm on the board of the Symphony Society, and I've never heard playing like that from someone unknown to the music world." Elena named her prestigious school, adding, "I was to tour Europe at 19, but then—" She trailed off, the weight of her lost future momentarily overwhelming. The man's eyebrows shot up in recognition. "Wait, were you the young prodigy who won the international youth competition in Vienna 12 years ago? Elena something?" She nodded, surprised to be remembered. "Elena Kovac." A murmur went through the crowd. Several guests pulled out phones, presumably to search her name. The hired pianist approached, his expression a mix of professional respect and personal curiosity. "I studied your recording of the Liszt Transcendental Etudes at Juilliard," he said. "Everyone thought you had disappeared, or worse." "In a way, I did disappear," Elena replied softly. The Harrington twins exchanged glances, their earlier mockery replaced by shame. Their mother stepped forward, social instincts finally kicking in. "Elena has been with our family for 6 months, she said, as if claiming some credit for discovering this talent. "We had no idea, of course." "No idea?" The older gentleman looked incredulous. "You have one of the most promising pianists of her generation cleaning your house, and you had no idea?" Mrs. Harrington flushed. The room grew uncomfortable again, but for entirely different reasons. The stark reality of Elena's situation, a renowned musical prodigy reduced to domestic service, cast a shadow over the glittering party. Mr. Harrington, ever the businessman, recognized a situation that needed managing. He stepped forward with his most charming smile. "Well, this calls for a celebration within our celebration. More champagne for everyone, and especially for our Elena." Servers sprang into action, glasses were refilled, and the immediate tension diffused. But something fundamental had changed. Guests who had looked through Elena all evening now approached her with questions, compliments, and in some cases business cards. The hired pianist asked if she would play another piece. The older gentleman from the Symphony Society wouldn't leave her side, peppering her with questions about her training and experience. Through it all, Elena felt as if she were in a dream. 6 years of invisibility had ended in an instant. She was seen, truly seen, for the first time since coming to America. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mrs. Harrington asked when she managed to pull Elena aside. Her tone held accusation, as if Elena had been deliberately hiding something valuable from them. Elena looked at her employer steadily. "You never asked," she said simply, "and I needed the work." Before Mrs. Harrington could respond, the twins approached, awkwardness radiating from them. "That was amazing," the daughter said, speaking directly to Elena for perhaps the first time. "Like seriously amazing." "Yeah," her brother added. "I feel like a total jerk now." His honesty, loosened by alcohol, was refreshingly direct. "I'm really sorry." Elena nodded, accepting the apology but not quite ready to absolve him completely. The humiliation of being ordered to perform was still fresh, even if the outcome had been unexpectedly positive. Across the room, she noticed the older gentleman speaking intently to Mr. Harrington, occasionally gesturing in her direction. Other guests were watching her with newfound interest, as if seeing her for the first time. "I should return to work," Elena said, suddenly uncomfortable with all the attention. "The guest bathrooms—" "Don't be ridiculous," Mrs. Harrington interrupted. "Antonio's team can handle that. You're a guest now." A guest in her maid's uniform, Elena thought but didn't say. Still, she allowed herself to be led back to the center of the party, where people immediately surrounded her with questions about her background and her music. As the evening progressed, Elena was persuaded to play again, this time a piece of her choosing, not as a command performance. She selected Debussy's Clair de Lune, its dreamy, impressionistic quality a contrast to the technical fireworks of the Chopin. The room once again fell silent as she played, the gentle notes washing over the guests like moonlight. When she finished, the applause was different, not shocked but appreciative, like the response at the end of a formal recital. Elena rose from the bench with more confidence this time, accepting the praise with a slight bow, as she had been taught years ago. The party continued around her, but with Elena now at its center rather than its edges. She found herself seated at the dining table between the Symphony Society board member and a music professor from the local university, engaged in passionate conversation about different interpretations of Beethoven's late sonatas. Occasionally, she would catch sight of the Harringtons watching her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Surprise, certainly, confusion perhaps, and something that might have been regret. Elena understood their discomfort. For 6 months they had treated her as a function rather than a person. They had discussed private matters in front of her as if she couldn't understand, had created messes for her to clean without consideration, had failed to learn the most basic facts about her life. And now they discovered that the woman who scrubbed their floors was, in her own world, someone of significance. It was a revelation that challenged their understanding not just of Elena, but of themselves. As midnight approached, Elena found herself exchanging contact information with several influential people in the music world. The Symphony Society board member pressed his card into her hand, making her promise to call him on Monday about an upcoming charity concert. The university professor asked if she would consider guest teaching a master class. For the first time in years, Elena allowed herself to hope, not just for survival but for the return of her music, for the life that had been interrupted but perhaps not ended. That night had begun with humiliation. It would end with possibility. Elena woke the next morning in the staff room momentarily disoriented. Sunlight streamed through the small window, casting a square of light on the plain white wall. For a few seconds she couldn't remember why she was here rather than in her own apartment. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back. The piano, the music, the applause, the business cards now tucked safely in her pocket. She sat up quickly, checking the time on her worn wristwatch. Nearly 9, later than she'd slept in years. Panic fluttered in her chest as she threw back the covers. Mrs. Harrington expected breakfast by 7:30, even on Sundays. Elena dressed hurriedly in yesterday's uniform, smoothing her hair as best she could before rushing toward the kitchen. She paused at the doorway, surprised by the scene before her. The Harrington family, all 4 of them, sat around the kitchen island, something Elena had never witnessed before. They usually took meals in the dining room or breakfast nook, never in the kitchen itself. More surprising still, they were managing their own breakfast. Mr. Harrington stood by the coffee machine, frowning at the buttons. Mrs. Harrington buttered toast with the uncertain movements of someone performing an unfamiliar task. The twins sat on stools, looking hungover and tired, picking at bowls of cereal. They all looked up when Elena appeared in the doorway. "Good morning," Mrs. Harrington said, her tone oddly formal. "We thought we should let you sleep." Elena blinked in confusion. "I am sorry to be late, ma'am. I will prepare breakfast right away." "No need," Mr. Harrington said, finally getting the coffee machine to work. "We've managed. Not very well, but we've managed." He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. An uncomfortable silence filled the kitchen. Elena stood awkwardly, unsure of her role in this new dynamic. Were they firing her? Would they expect her to continue her duties as if nothing had happened? "Please sit down," Mrs. Harrington said, gesturing to a stool at the island. "We'd like to talk with you." Elena hesitated, then perched on the edge of the stool, hands folded in her lap. Being invited to sit with the family felt strange, a crossing of boundaries that had been firmly established from her first day. "About last night," Mr. Harrington began, setting a cup of coffee in front of Elena without asking if she wanted one. "That was quite a revelation." "You're really good," the daughter said, looking at Elena with new eyes. "Like professional good." "Grammy good," her brother added, wincing as he pressed a cold glass of water to his temple. "I still can't believe it." "Thank you," Elena said quietly, unsure where this conversation was heading. Mrs. Harrington cleared her throat. "We received several calls this morning. About you." She sounded slightly put out, as if Elena had deliberately orchestrated this attention. "Mr. Reynolds from the Symphony Society called at 7 a.m. Professor Chen from the university called shortly after. Both were very interested in discussing opportunities with you." "I see," Elena said carefully. "They seemed to think you were some kind of lost musical treasure," Mr. Harrington added, studying Elena with businessman's calculating eyes. "Mr. Reynolds mentioned a charity concert next month. He was quite insistent about your participation." Elena felt a small flame of hope flicker to life within her chest. A real concert. A chance to play again. Not just on her small keyboard in her apartment, but on a proper stage. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but a smile tugged at her lips. "That would be wonderful," she admitted. The Harrington family exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. "We've been talking," Mrs. Harrington said, "and we feel—" She paused, looking to her husband for support. "We feel that perhaps we've been underutilizing your talents," Mr. Harrington finished diplomatically. The son snorted. "What Dad means is that we feel like jerks for having a world-class pianist scrubbing our toilets for minimum wage." "That's not exactly how I would put it," Mrs. Harrington said with a sharp look at her son. "But essentially, yes. We had no idea of your background, Elena, of your abilities." "You never asked," Elena said again, softly but without accusation. It was simply a statement of fact. The family had the grace to look embarrassed. "No, we didn't," Mr. Harrington acknowledged. "And that's on us. But now that we know, well, things should change." Elena took a sip of the coffee, buying time to think. "What kind of changes do you mean?" "For starters, we'd like to sponsor your participation in the charity concert," Mrs. Harrington said. "That means covering any expenses, helping you prepare, making sure you have appropriate attire. Richard has already spoken to his tailor about a fitting. And we've discussed setting up a practice space for you here," Mr. Harrington added. "The piano room is hardly used. You should be free to practice there whenever you like." Elena's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. The offer was generous, unexpected, but there was something in their eagerness that made her uneasy. It felt as if they were trying to claim some ownership of her talent, to retroactively become her patrons rather than her employers. "That is very kind," she said carefully, "but I'm not sure—" "We'd adjust your duties, of course," Mrs. Harrington interrupted, misinterpreting Elena's hesitation. "Fewer hours cleaning, more time for music. We could bring in additional help for the housework." The daughter leaned forward. "Mom's trying to say we want to help you restart your career." "Like for real?" Elena looked at each of their faces in turn. Their interest seemed genuine, if complicated by guilt and the sudden realization that the woman who had been invisible to them for months was, in fact, remarkable. "I appreciate the offer," she said finally, "but I need to think about it. This is a lot to process." Mr. Harrington nodded, looking slightly disappointed but understanding. "Of course. Take the day to consider. We can talk more tomorrow." "Actually," Elena said, finding courage she didn't know she had, "I'd like to go home today, to my apartment. I need some space to think about everything that's happened." The family looked surprised, as if they'd forgotten she had a life and home outside their house. "Oh," Mrs. Harrington said. "Yes, of course. Do you need a ride?" Elena shook her head. "The bus is fine. I'm used to it." After a slightly awkward farewell, Elena gathered her few belongings from the staff room and left the Harrington mansion. The morning air felt fresh and clean, carrying a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. Her apartment was just as she'd left it days ago, small but neat. With her keyboard set up on a folding table by the window, it looked pitiful now after playing the magnificent Steinway at the Harringtons. But it had kept her connected to music during the darkest times, and for that, she felt a rush of gratitude. Elena sat on her bed and emptied her pockets, spreading the business cards on her faded bedspread, 5 in total, each representing a door that had suddenly opened. The Symphony Society, the university, a music foundation, a recording studio, a wealthy arts patron. With trembling fingers, she took out her phone, an old model with a cracked screen, and dialed the number on the first card. 2 hours and 3 phone calls later, Elena sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb everything that had happened. Mr. Reynolds had been effusive, offering her not just a spot in the charity concert, but a series of paid performances afterward. Professor Chen had discussed a visiting artist position that included housing on campus. The Arts Foundation had mentioned a grant specifically for refugee musicians. Opportunities she'd stopped allowing herself to dream about were suddenly within reach. As evening approached, Elena found herself drawn to her keyboard. She powered it on and began to play, not Chopin or Debussy this time, but a folk melody from her homeland. A simple tune her grandmother had taught her before she could even read music, her small fingers guided by wrinkled hands over ancient ivory keys. As she played, she thought about the Harringtons' offer. It was generous, yes, perhaps even life-changing. But there was something about it that felt like being kept as a curiosity. The amazing piano-playing Maid, their secret weapon at dinner parties, a story they could tell at social gatherings. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. An unfamiliar number. Elena answered cautiously. Ms. Kovac, this is Diane Lewis from the National Arts Foundation. I was at the Harrington party last night. I heard you play. I've spent all day tracking down your number. Yes? Elena said, surprised. We have an emergency situation. Our pianist for the Governor's Arts Gala has fallen ill. Food poisoning, poor thing. The event is on Tuesday. We need someone who can perform Chopin's ballads with minimal rehearsal time. After what I heard last night, I immediately thought of you. We can offer our standard performance fee, of course. Elena's heart raced. The Governor's Arts Gala was a major event, covered by local media, attended by hundreds of influential people. Ms. Kovac, are you there?
Yes, Elena said.
Yes, I'm here. And yes, I can do it. After the call ended, Elena sat motionless, letting the reality sink in. A real performance. A legitimate fee. A chance to be seen not as a novelty, but as a professional musician. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Mrs. Harrington, have you thought about our offer? We're happy to have you back with the new arrangement whenever you're ready. Elena read the message twice, then set the phone down without responding. She would need to answer eventually, but not tonight. Tonight was for planning her own future, not accepting someone else's vision of it. She moved to the tiny closet and pushed aside her few clothes, reaching for a battered leather case in the back corner. She hadn't opened it in years, but had carried it with her through every move, every hardship. Inside was her music, scores she'd studied and performed, handwritten notes from her professors, programs from her early concerts. Elena spread the yellowed pages across her small table, memories flooding back with each familiar notation. She had been someone before coming to America, before becoming a maid. She could be that person again, or rather, a new version of herself that incorporated everything she'd experienced. The humiliation of being asked to play as a joke at the party had transformed into an unexpected gift. The rediscovery of herself. Elena picked up her phone and finally responded to Mrs. Harrington. Thank you for your offer. I have decided to pursue other opportunities. I will come by tomorrow to collect my final paycheck. I wish your family well. Then she turned back to her music and began to play, practicing late into the night for Tuesday's performance, her first in 6 years, but certainly not her last. 1 year later, Elena stood backstage at Symphony Hall, smoothing the fabric of her midnight blue gown. Her hands were steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of the audience settling into their seats. A sold-out show, they'd told her. Her third this season. 5 minutes, Ms. Kovac, the stage manager said, poking his head into her dressing room. Elena nodded, taking a deep breath. No matter how many concerts she performed, That pre-show flutter of nerves never quite disappeared. Her old professor had once told her that was a good thing. The day you stop feeling nervous is the day you stop caring enough to give your best. She glanced around the dressing room with its fresh flowers and elegant furnishings. Such a contrast to where she had been this time last year, up before dawn to scrub floors and prepare meals for others. Sometimes it felt like a dream, the speed with which her life had transformed. After declining the Harringtons' offer, things had moved quickly. The governor's arts gala had been a triumph, earning her a standing ovation and glowing mentions in the local press. That exposure led to more opportunities, a temporary teaching position at the university, invitations to perform at private events, and eventually, an audition with the symphony. Now she was their featured soloist for the season, with a recording contract in negotiation and a small but comfortable apartment paid for by her own earnings. She had even hired an immigration lawyer who was helping her secure a more permanent status as a person of extraordinary ability in the arts. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. The door opened to reveal Professor Chen, her mentor from the university, holding a small gift bag. "Just wanted to wish you luck," he said, "though I know you don't need it. Tonight's program is perfectly suited to your strengths." Elena smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it." He handed her the gift bag. "A small token from the students in your master class. They're all in the audience tonight, by the way. Front row, looking terribly nervous on your behalf." Elena peeked into the bag and found a beautiful leather-bound notebook with her initials embossed on the cover. Inside, each student had written a personal note of gratitude and encouragement. "This is..." She swallowed hard, fighting sudden emotion. "This is wonderful." Professor Chen nodded, understanding the depth of feeling behind her simple words. "You've made quite an impact on them. On all of us, really." 2 minutes, Ms. Kovacs," the stage manager called. "I should go find my seat," Professor Chen said. "Play brilliantly. Or rather, play as you always do, which is brilliantly." After he left, Elena took one last look in the mirror. The woman who looked back was both familiar and strange. The same features, but held differently now. Head higher, shoulders straighter, eyes clearer. The stage manager appeared at her door. "It's time, Ms. Kovacs." Elena followed him through the backstage area to the wings. The conductor was already on the podium, the orchestra seated and ready. As the house lights dimmed, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. There had been challenges, of course, rebuilding her technique after years away from serious practice, navigating the politics of the music world, finding her artistic voice again, but each obstacle had felt manageable compared to what she had already survived. The audience applauded as the conductor introduced the program. Elena's heart beat faster as he announced her name, detailing her background and the extraordinary circumstances of her rediscovery at a private party a year ago. And then it was time. Elena walked onto the stage, the spotlight warm on her skin. She bowed to the audience, then to the orchestra, before taking her place at the gleaming grand piano. As she adjusted the bench and positioned her hands, she allowed herself a moment to savor the journey from invisibility to this bright public recognition. The conductor raised his baton. Elena nodded her readiness, and then she was playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, her first performance with full orchestra since leaving her homeland. The music filled the hall, her fingers drawing sounds from the piano that seemed to speak directly to the hearts of the listeners. When the first movement ended, she remained poised, focused, as the audience broke protocol to applaud. Through the next 2 movements, she rode waves of emotion, the plaintive melody of the adagio, the triumphant finale with its thundering chords. When the last note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence before the audience erupted. They rose to their feet as one, applause crashing like waves against the stage. Elena stood and bowed, accepting a bouquet from a young girl who ran up from the front row. As she looked out at the sea of faces, Elena noticed something unexpected in the back of the hall. The Harrington family, all 4 of them, standing and applauding with everyone else. She hadn't seen them since collecting her final paycheck 12 months ago, though she'd heard through mutual acquaintances that they often mentioned their former maid who became a concert pianist. After 3 curtain calls, Elena finally exited the stage, her heart full. There was a small reception planned for after the concert. Donors, music critics, orchestra members. her new life, but first she had a visitor waiting in her dressing room. "Grandmother," Elena cried, rushing to embrace the tiny, white-haired woman who stood by the makeup table. Her grandmother held her tight, tears streaming down her deeply lined face. "My Elena," she whispered in their native language. "My little songbird, I am so proud." It had taken months of paperwork and the help of refugee organizations, but Elena had finally managed to bring her grandmother to America. The elderly woman had arrived just 3 days ago, still marveling at the plane journey and the size of American grocery stores. "Was I good?" Elena asked, suddenly a child again, seeking approval from the woman who had first placed her hands on piano keys. "Better than good," her grandmother said, cupping Elena's face. "You played with your heart, not just your hands. That is what I always taught you, yes?" Elena nodded, her own eyes wet with tears. A knock at the door interrupted their moment. "Ms. Kovac? The reception is starting," the stage manager called. "We'll be right there," Elena answered. She helped her grandmother to her feet. "Come, there are people I want you to meet." The reception was held in an elegant room adjacent to the concert hall. Well-dressed patrons mingled with musicians, sipping champagne and discussing the performance. Elena moved through the crowd with her grandmother on her arm, accepting congratulations and introducing the woman who had been her first teacher. As they approached the refreshment table, Elena spotted the Harringtons looking slightly out of place despite their expensive clothes. They weren't regular symphony patrons, she realized. They had come specifically to see her. After a moment's hesitation, she approached them. "Hello," she said simply. Their faces registered surprise, then pleasure at being acknowledged. "Elena," Mrs. Harrington said, "you were magnificent tonight, truly." "Thank you for coming," Elena replied, genuinely touched by their presence. "I'd like you to meet my grandmother who taught me to play." As introductions were made, Elena noticed how different it felt to interact with the Harringtons now, as equals, with nothing between them but mutual respect. The lingering awkwardness of their past relationship had faded, replaced by something that wasn't quite friendship, but wasn't resentment either. "We've followed your career," Mr. Harrington said. "The article in the arts section last month was particularly good. And we still have the video from that night," the daughter added. "The night you played at our house? Dad shows it to guests sometimes, though I think that's a bit tacky." She grinned, showing she meant no offense. "I hope it's a good reminder," Elena said carefully, "of looking beyond appearances." The son nodded, surprising her with his sincerity. "It changed things for us. How we see people. Not just staff, but everyone." Before Elena could respond, the conductor appeared at her side. "Elena, the director of the Berlin Philharmonic would like a word. He's very interested in having you as a guest soloist next season." Elena excused herself, promising to catch up with the Harringtons before they left. As she moved away with her grandmother still on her arm, she felt a sense of completion. The circle had closed somehow. The family that had inadvertently launched her second chance at a music career was now witnessing its fruition. Later that night, after the reception ended and the concert hall emptied, Elena found herself alone on the stage. The cleaning staff had kindly given her a few minutes of privacy when they saw her lingering. She sat at the piano, not playing, just resting her fingers lightly on the keys. The vast dark hall seemed to hold echoes of the evening's music, of applause, of possibility. Elena thought about the strange path that had led her here, the dreams abandoned and then reclaimed, the humiliation that became opportunity, the joke that turned into triumph. If any part of that journey had been different, if she had worked for another family, if she hadn't been at that party, if the son hadn't dared her to play, would she be here now? It was impossible to know, but sitting in the quiet darkness of Symphony Hall, Elena made peace with all of it, the loss, the struggle, the unexpected second chance. She pressed a single key, letting one pure note ring out through the empty space. That first note had changed everything, just as it had at the Harringtons' party. But this time it wasn't the end of a story, but the beginning of a new one. A story she was writing herself, note by note, day by day. Elena smiled, stood, and walked confidently into the wings. Tomorrow was another day of practice, another day of building her reclaimed life, and for the first time in many years she looked forward to every moment of it.